What is going on, fellas? What is going on? This is the last good man in Jersey, here with another episode designed to help you win. Click like, click subscribe, and with that out of the way, let's get into it. Guys, I want you to know something. You're special. Don't ever let someone tell you that you're too short or you're too unattractive. You're special, and the older you get, the more special you become. We're going to talk about why. Because today's episode is the cliffs of insanity. There's a movie that you may or may not have seen. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend it strongly. It's called The Princess Bride. I think that for me, that's probably one of my top 10 funniest movies all time. It's not number one or two, but if I'm going to rank my top 10, it's definitely in there. Great writing, great script, great acting, fantastic acting. And without going through all of the movie, we're going to talk about a particular segment of the movie. If you've seen it, you know where this is going. If you haven't, well, you're in for a treat. Okay. Story centers around a princess bride. Won't spend too much time on that, except to say this princess is abducted by this trio of bad men. Basically, there's the leader, the Sicilian, his strongman, and his swordsman. They're carrying her off, and she's being pursued by a man in black who wants to capture her. They're racing in boats across the ocean. The trio has a head start. The man in black is trying to catch up, and they're thinking, what do we do? The leader of the group, the Sicilian, basically says, look, we just need to get ahead to the cliffs of insanity. Sure, he's gaining on us, but once we get to those cliffs, that's a wrap. There is an insurmountable hurdle that's going to prevent him from ever getting his baby back. So just get to those cliffs, because once we're there, we're safe. Now, you can see where the analogy is going, right? We're going to talk about, women in the sweet spot, and a couple of interesting stats that you may not be aware of, guys, but they're useful, because they'll help you to understand why I'm so adamant in saying, if you meet someone and they're argumentative, if you meet someone and you just can't seem to connect, bounce. Get out there and go find someone who gets it. Some women will get it and some women won't. But the reality is, this is a game of musical chairs. There are a whole lot of contestants. The women are the contestants. There aren't that many chairs. That's us guys. Not everybody's going to get a seat. I read an interesting article. We're going to talk about two different things, but we'll start with one interesting article on women and kids, childbirth. Basically, if you start to look at the percent of women who have kids, who've had a kid, kind of at least had their first kid, across different age segments, what you'll find is kind of interesting. Okay, now in this article, we start to break down women looking first, like 15 plus. So able to have kids, whether or not, it's kind of normal to have kids is irrelevant to this article. And basically what you'll see is, as expected, 15 to 19, it's possible to have kids, but that's not really the life stage where you would expect to see women with kids. Like 95% of women haven't had their first kid between 15 and 19. You go through those early 20s, the numbers start to decline. You go through those late 20s, the numbers continue to decline. By about 30, it's about 50-50. Women are just as likely to have had that first kid as not, to at least have had that first kid as not. You go through those early 30s, more decline. You go through those late 30s, more decline. By the time women hit 40, 85% of them have had that kid by that point. Now, here's where things get really interesting. 40 is the cliff. 40 is the cliff. About 15% of women haven't had a kid at 40, haven't had that first kid. About 15% of women haven't had that first kid at 45. And the numbers, they stopped analyzing after that. 40 to 45, it's pretty much a wrap. Now, this is not to say it can't happen, but it is to say that the probability of it happening goes way down. Lots of things contribute to that. Nature is starting to have an impact. You've got women who never wanted kids kind of aging up. The eligible pool of men who want to have kids with women who are 40 to 45 evaporating. Basically, those 40s, that's where things are pretty much baked. Now, I want to make sure I'm clear on something. There are stories, I'm sure everybody knows, that person or those couple of people, women, 40, they have that kid. Yeah, sure. I'm not discounting any of that. But what I am saying is that for every story you've got of a woman who turned 40 and finally had her first kid, there are 100,000 women who didn't. It's drastic, the cliff that you see at 40. Bringing this up to you guys so that you understand. When you're focusing on those sweet spot, women 40 to 45, never married, no kids, if they don't get it, if they're argumentative, oppressive, if they're looking at you and really kind of trying to figure out why they should spend their time with you, just bounce. Leave them to their own devices. There are plenty of women out there who do get it, who kind of recognize the situation and are saying, hey, I don't have time to continue to be unrealistic. I'm a 7. I need to shoot for a 7. Stop hoping I somehow snag a 10 who I'm not qualified for, which is fundamentally the issue. Here's the other part of the equation, guys, and this will just give you some perspective on the cliff. We kind of talked about reaching 40, never having had a kid, and the likelihood that it will happen just purely from statistics. Let's kind of talk about the process a little bit. IVF, because likely at 40, that's what we're talking about. Separate article, but still interesting. With IVF, and I and my ex-wife went through this, so I can relate to it on levels. The likelihood that a single round of IVF works isn't actually that high. If you've never gone into it, you've probably never looked at kind of the process. It's an iterative process. You go through rounds. A single round doesn't work, but over time, with rounds of IVF, you start to see, increasing likelihood of success. Article broke down success rates, different age groups. I'm not going to go through all of the age groups. I'm going to focus on the cliff. Once again, once you hit that cliff, 40 to 44. And here's what the article said. With IVF, women 40 to 44 who'd gone through 6 rounds of IVF had a pregnancy success rate of about 1/3. So, 6 rounds, 1 in 3. That's the reality. The analysis stopped at 44. 45, they didn't even bother. You got a woman who wants to have kids. She's got the man in front of them who's got the income, the education, and she's still being picky about, you could be taller or you could be more traveled. Just leave her out in the cold. She can be one of the women who doesn't get a seat. You don't owe her a favor. Go find a woman who gets it. It was very interesting me to realize that, in the sweet spot, even with IVF, the likelihood with 6 rounds is only 1 in 3. And it's not as simple as just going through the process. I mean, there's an emotional toll that takes. So who knows how long 6 rounds could take, or kind of the willingness the woman might have for going through subsequent rounds after that. But it was interesting to see kind of how that worked. Now, as an aside to the women out there, I'm not presenting these facts to crush hopes and dreams. Not by any means. More, I'm relaying these facts to try to impress upon people a point. 40 to 44, this is for women, never married, no kids, and you want a kid? If you aren't actively pursuing a relationship with a man, then that's your fault. That's your, I guess I'll call it laziness in this case. Are you working out of your house or are you working out of a coffee shop? Are you at the gym where the guys are? Are you at the sports bar where the guys are? Are you sitting back complaining about how the guy you want doesn't want you while the clock keeps ticking? To all my fellas out there, if you're focused on women in the sweet spot, just keep in mind, even if they have a man in front of them who's interested in a relationship and they are actively trying to have kids, it's 1 in 3. The musical chairs game is 3 contestants, 1 chair. And that's assuming that they're all in the game. When you reflect on how many of them aren't in relationships, the numbers explode. So, to the guys, understand how special you are. Understand what you're offering. And look for women who get it. Look for women who will appreciate it and who aren't going to send you, jumping through 15 million flaming hoops, because you don't have to.